What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Martian MMA podcast. I'm your host, and my name is John. And this week, we are back with the 59th episode of the podcast. This week, we will be analyzing and predicting the UFC on ESPN Plus 9 card going down this weekend in Ottawa, Ontario, Canada, headlined by Iaquinta versus Donald Cerrone. Towards the end of the program, we will also be recapping the UFC Sunrise event that happened this past weekend. But starting things off, we will be breaking down all 12 of the UFC fights going down this weekend. The prelims for this event start on ESPN Plus at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, with the main card kicking off at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time as well. So we will be diving right into the action this week. We got a lot of close matchups, 4 fights that are standing at a near pick'em right now in the odds. So we got a lot of close matchups, and we're going to be starting things off in the bantamweight division. We have Mitch Gagnon, who is 12-4, taking on Cole Smith, who is 6-0. The opening betting line for this one was Mitch Gagnon, the -140 favorite, to Cole Smith at +100. Right now, over on our affiliated sportsbook, 5dimes.eu, we see Mitch Gagnon, the slight favorite, at -115 to Cole Smith at -105. So there's two-way action coming in on this fight. A little more action on Cole Smith's way. As the underdog, it's understandable that people are laying that chalk on Cole Smith, considering that Mitch Gagnon has not fought in over 2.5 years. His last fight was in December of 2016, and before that, his last bout was in 2014. So he's only had one fight in 4.5 years. So that's a lot of the reasoning why I think people are betting against Gagnon in this spot. But if you're looking at who's the better fighter, I think it's pretty clearly Mitch Gagnon. He has the more experience. He's fought the better competition. Cole Smith, he's 6-0. He looks like a decent fighter, but it's just hard to tell a lot about him. There's just not very much footage about him at all. I scoured the internet for him, and with the Newsome MMA tape index, I think they only had about 3 fights from Cole Smith listed on their website. So it's hard to get a good feel of where Cole Smith's skills are fully at. He did go the 5-round distance with Carlos Galvan, which is one of his fights on YouTube, a hilarious fight to watch, where Carlos Galvan's teammates are filming the entire fight through their TV and complaining about how their coach or friend is losing the fight the entire time. But Cole Smith has not really fought too good competition. His best win is over an opponent, Tyler Wilson, who's 5-1. Even with Mitch Gagnon's long layoff, I still think he will be the better fighter in this spot. It's just tough to trust either one of these guys. The long layoff for Gagnon and the debuting fighter in Smith. I really have not seen much skills from Smith that I feel confident in picking him. He's really trying to clinch against the cage in this fight, get takedowns, look for back control. But he did not show too much urgency. He did not look for a finish. He did not look for much ground and pound in the fight that I watched against Galvan. And, Gagnon was taken down a few times by Matthew Lopez in their fight. He actually rocked Matthew Lopez pretty hard in the first round of their fight with the left hook, but could not finish Lopez and ended up losing rounds 2 and 3 in the grappling realm of things by Matthew Lopez. So Smith's definitely going to try to replicate that same game plan that Matthew Lopez did, withstand the early storm from Gagnon and try to out-grapple him in the later rounds. But honestly, I think that Gagnon has better chance of winning this fight, so I slightly lean with Gagnon, and I'm going to go with picking him by decision. Next fight in the heavyweight division, we have Arjun Singh Buehler, who is 8-1, taking on Juan Adams, who is 5-0. The opening betting line for this one was Arjun Buehler as the -110 slight underdog to Juan Adams as the -130 slight favorite. Right now, over on 5dimes.eu, we see Juan Adams the slight favorite at -115 to Buehler slight dog at -105. So another near pick'em, like the first fight. We are dealing with two wrestle boxers at heavyweight in this one. Both guys, I'd say they're the best thing they do is box, and the second best thing they do is wrestle. So I think that we're kind of looking at a bit of a mirror match in this one. I think that Juan Adams has actually the better boxing of the two. I think he looked better against Chris De La Rocha in his most recent fight. He was lighting him up with punches on the feet. He was able to get a body lock, trip takedown, and have some good top pressure, good ground and pound, and eventually get De La Rocha out of there. I think the third round of their fight. Bueller's last fight was also a good one. He withstood some early adversity from Marcelo Golm, was getting his leg kicked pretty bad in that one. His calf was starting to shut down in the first round of their fight, but he just kept marching through the calf kick and started throwing punches, and it actually ended up working for him. He ended up, starting to get the better of that fight by just marching forward through the leg kicks and landing the harder punches on Marcelo Golm in that fight. And he actually did get the takedown in the third round after a pretty grueling type of fight, and he won the third round with his takedowns and top control. So he's got some pretty decent cardio for a big guy, a Bueller. He's kind of a fat heavyweight. He did get stuck on the ground one time pretty recently in his most recent loss against Adam Wachorczyk, where he got omoplated on the ground. So I think that Juan Adams is slightly better on the feet. I think he's like the more athletic heavyweight. I think that he will be able to defend any takedown attempts from Arjun Bueller in this one. I think he'll be able to keep it standing on the feet. He might even hit an offensive takedown of his own. And then I think that Juan Adams will win this fight via decision. Next fight is in the featherweight division. We have Kyle Nelson, who is 12-2, taking on Matt Sales, who is 7-2. The opening betting line for this one was Matt Sales as the -135 favorite to Kyle Nelson as the -105 underdog. Right now, we are seeing Matt Sales -225 to Kyle Nelson at +185. So a lot more action coming in on Matt Sales' way in this one. I'm going to disagree with the line movement. I actually think that the value has now shifted to Kyle Nelson at +185 in this one. Now, Kyle Nelson in his UFC debut last fight, he did get stopped in the second round versus Carlos Diego Ferreira, but that was a very short notice fight. Ferreira's opponent fell out on very short notice in Canada, so Nelson got the call up to the UFC, up a weight class. He has fought at 55 before, but 145 seems to me is much better weight class. He actually started pretty fast against Diego Ferreira and hurt him with a couple punches and a nice kick that looked like it rocked Ferreira, but Ferreira was able to withstand that early storm. He took down Nelson in the first round and eventually did the same thing in the second round and pounded him out for a ground and pound finish in the second round. So he definitely started a little fast. He got a little overzealous when he hurt CDF in that fight, and he just didn't pick his shots well enough to get the early finish. But I think that was a little bit of octagon jitters. He got that short notice fight. He was very emotional coming into that fight. And it definitely showed, and it looked like he had a little bit of an adrenaline dump. It looked like he was a little undersized versus Diego Ferreira, and I think this matchup at 145 is going to be a lot better for him. But he's taking on a very solid opponent, Matt Sales. Matt Sales did lose his last fight against Shimon Moraes, but it was a very competitive bout. He 29-28 decision for Shimon. Shimon won the first two rounds, but Matt Sales took over in the third round, was looking like the fresher fighter. That was his UFC debut in that one. He came off a very nice finish over Yazan Haja on the Tuesday Night Contender Series last year. He ran through Haja in that one. Had some real powerful hands in that one. Didn't really see too much of that power against Shimon Moraes, though. Looked like he was throwing a lot more activity, punches, just kind of throwing more consistent volume out there instead of looking to sit down on a shot and hurt his opponent, while Shimon was throwing with some serious power. So I think that's why the first two rounds went to Shimon in that fight. Is he was just throwing with a little more ill intent, throwing harder. Even though Sales was light on his feet, he was in and out using his movements. He just didn't land those effective shots in the first two rounds to get that decision. Now, if you listen to the commentary on that fight, Rogan is like blowing his load at Matt Sales, even though he's losing the fight. He's like, man, I'm really impressed with Matt Sales' cardio right now. What if this fight was 5 rounds? Matt Sales might take over. All right, well, that's a completely unrealistic scenario for a debuting fighter to imagine that this fight is 5 rounds. Maybe in a couple years he'll fight in 5 rounds, but he didn't. He started slow in that first fight and he lost. So no matter how much you try to spin it that he looked good in that third round, he did not show up in the first 2 rounds. Another weakness I noticed from Matt Sales is that he was taken down and almost got choked out by an opponent. Hickman was his last name. Let me figure out the gentleman's first name. George Hickman, back in 2016, his only loss outside of the UFC, Matt Sales, it was a split decision loss. It was a very close fight. But in the first round, Hickman was able to take him down and take his back and almost rear naked choke Sales in that one. But Sales had some good defense. He was able to defend the takedowns for the rest of the fight. And make those last 2 rounds competitive. But he definitely got caught a little off guard with the takedown in that fight. And if you're Kyle Nelson and you have 2 losses to look at for Matt Sales, and you saw that one of them, his opponent had some success with grappling, I got to think that Kyle Nelson's going to try to use his grappling as well. And he does have the ability to hit offensive takedowns, to stay in top position, and to land some good ground and pound. We've seen that in his regional fights. Against Rizazi, against Kama Worthy. Those are both somewhat decent opponents that he went through with relative ease. So, where the opening line was at, I would say it was more of a value situation on Matt Sales. But where it's at now, plus 185, I think people are counting Nelson out a little bit too much based on his last performance. I think that Kyle Nelson has a good chance at hitting his takedowns in this fight, making it a grindy type of fight and winning a decision 29-28. So the pick is going to be the underdog Kyle Nelson. Next fight in the welterweight division, we got Nordine Taleb, who is 14-6, taking on Kyle Prepelic, who is 12-5. The opening betting line for this one, surprisingly, was Prepelic, the minus 135 favorite, to Taleb at minus 105. Right now, over on 5 Dimes, Taleb sits at minus 345 to Prepelic at plus 285. So a ridiculous amount of action coming in on Nordine Taleb in this spot, and I really don't blame people. Whoever opened this line was, I must have been a little bit drunk. Honestly, Nordine Taleb, I think, opened up as an underdog versus CR Badarazara as well. So I think the odds makers just not really giving Nordine Taleb too much credit. And I can see why. He has had his fair share of struggles lately. He has had some pretty bad losses. I can see why you would open him as a slight. I couldn't see why you'd open him as a slight underdog to Kyle Prepelic in this fight. Maybe a slight favorite, but an underdog to Prepelic, who's making his UFC debut on short notice, up a weight class. I think that you really can't open Prepelic as a favorite in this spot under any circumstances, and where the line is at now proves that. So, Prepelic his past 3 fights have been at 160 pounds, 165 pounds, and 155 pounds. So he is kind of in that middle weight class between 55 and 70, but this will be his first fight at 70, to my knowledge. He has some pretty solid stand-up. He likes throwing head kicks, and he also has some pretty solid boxing. He was able to defend the takedowns of Cody Pfister the really desperate takedowns of Cody Pfister. That is probably his most well-recognized opponent in his last fight. I believe in that fight, Prepelic was supposed to fight a different opponent, a 5-round fight, and then his opponent fell out short notice, and Cody Pfister came in and saved the day. Now, for how desperate Cody Pfister was in that fight, Prepelic's performance was actually a little bit worrisome. He was not able to finish Pfister. Pfister looked, real desperate. He was actually, taken down a couple times and had his back taken by Cody Pfister in round 2 of that fight. So that's a very worrisome sign against for Prepelic. And he was actually being outstruck by his opponent, Scott Hudson, in their fight before he was able to reverse things around in round 2, get the takedown. Actually, he hurt his opponent in that one, ended up on top and finished him with some ground and pound TKO victory. That's a pretty cool fight to watch on YouTube. Scott Hudson versus Kyle Prepelic. It's a really cool angle of the guy like shooting the fight next to the cage. He was taken down by Troy Lamson though in his most recent loss. That was in 2017. He showed a little bit of weakness on the ground there. He could not get off his back for the entirety of the round, and all 3 rounds went the same way, where he was just taken down and he could not get up, and that's the way Troy Lamson beat him easily. But the thing is, Taleb is not going to implement that type of game plan. He is not a striker at all. I'd say that Prepelic, I'd say he's close to UFC ready. I think that the 55 weight class would suit him better. I think that his ground game is a little bit of a weakness. But his stand-up is pretty solid, and it looks like he's improving his ground game as well. It looked improved versus Pfister. But Taleb is going to look to take him out on the feet. Taleb is definitely a striker. He actually is a pretty poor grappler of his own right. You saw that on full display in the Claudio Silva fight. He was beating up Claudio Silva on the feet pretty bad, but he was taken down off a leg kick. He could not get up off his back. He actually tried leg locking Claudio Silva in that fight, and that actually really made him pay. He ended up on bottom, and he ended up getting choked out by Claudio Silva, despite it looking like he was winning that fight easily. And that was a fight where he was a 4-1 underdog in. That was a fight where Silva was, plus 310 or something like that before the fight. And so it's a kind of similar situation where people are just giving Nordine Taleb way too much credit on the books. But I do think Taleb should win this fight in the striking exchanges. He is the better striker. He will be much bigger in there. He'll definitely have some size on Prepelic. Taleb's got, good leg kicks. I think he has good striking defense as well. But, in that fight against Sean Strickland, he was showing good defense. He was winning the fight. Strickland was having trouble landing. And then all of a sudden, Strickland caught that jaw of Taleb and dropped him and finished him with some ground and pound in that fight. So Sean Strickland is not really known as the heaviest puncher, and when you're getting dropped by Sean Strickland, it's definitely not a good sign. So that's definitely what went into the odds makers thinking when he opened Prepelic as a slight favorite. So when Nordine Taleb is fighting a point fighting style type of fight where he's taking his time and picking his shots, I don't think he's as effective. I think he's more effective when he has short outbursts of offense, like he did versus Danny Roberts when he hit him with that big head kick and that punch combination that knocked him out. He knocked out Eric Silva. When the dude is throwing power, he's most effective. So if Nordine Taleb comes out in this fight and tries to get Prepelic out of there in round 1 with some heavy stand-up strikes, I think he will do it. But if he tries to fight smart, he gives his opponent too much respect. He's just asking to get caught again, like he did versus Strickland. He was doing everything right versus Strickland, and then Strickland just hit him with an unorthodox punch, and it didn't look like even like too hard of a shot. It just caught Taleb on the jaw, and it dropped him and finished him. So. If the best path to victory is Taleb knocking him out in the first round, the later this fight goes, I actually think Prepelic has a good chance of catching the chin or taking over rounds 2 and 3. But I'm going to side with the favorite Taleb. I think he should get Prepelic out of there via first round knockout. The next fight takes place in the bantamweight division. We got Vince Morales, who is 8-3, taking on Alamin Zahabi, who is 7-1. The opening betting line for this one was Zahabi, the minus 215 favorite, to Morales as the plus 165 underdog. Right now, over on 5 dimes, we see Zahabi minus 150 to Morales at plus 130. So, more action coming in on Vince Morales' way. And this is a very close type of fight. Another type of fight where I think these guys are very similar fighters to one another. They're both, I'd say, boxing heavy fighters. They both don't use too much movement. They like standing in front of one another, standing their ground. Not using too much wasted energy and movement by bouncing around the cage. They like that, kind of like a Muay Thai stance where they're, just kind of marching in front of each other. But that leaves both fighters open to leg kicks, and that's what Ricardo Ramos did versus Zahabi in his last fight. Zahabi was looking good in that fight. He started off slow versus Ramos. Looked like he was taking over in round 2, landing the better boxing and landing the better, cleaner, harder strikes in that fight. He's got a real nice jab and an uppercut. Those are his favorite punches, but then he got caught with that spinning back elbow versus Ricardo Ramos, and it just put him out cold. I believe it broke his jaw and set him out for the past 18 months. I think Zahabi will have the better ground game of the two in this matchup. He is a brown belt of a TriStar gym with his brother, Firas Zahabi. He, had some good success in his fight versus Vieira, where he was able to defend takedowns in that fight and avoid the dangerous grappling of the Brazilian in that fight, and win that fight with mostly his striking. He actually had some pretty good output and pace in round 3 of that fight. He closed that fight strong, so he's definitely got the cardio to go the full 3 rounds. So did Vince Morales though. He came on very strong in round 3 versus Song Yadong in his most recent fight. Morales also has very solid boxing. He's got some real power in his right hand, but I don't think his defense is too good. He was dropped by his opponent Hempelman in one of his. Let's see, did he lose that fight? No, he came back and won that fight. But that fight was only a year ago. And then his fight with Domingo Pilarte on the Tuesday Night Contender Series, man, what a crazy fight that was. A back and forth striking battle where they were both rocking each other and dropping each other in the first round. And Morales almost finished Pilarte, but Pilarte was able to clinch up and get the takedown, and eventually was finished by Domingo Pilarte via rear naked choke in round 2 of that fight. It was just it's just a crazy battle though, but luckily he bounced back with a quick win in Bellator, and then he got the call to come back to the UFC to fight Song Yadong in China. Now, he did lose the first 2 rounds of that fight. I believe like I said, he did come on strong and win the 3rd round versus Yadong, but he just started a little slow, didn't really have too many offensive tools, and really struggled with the offense of Song Yadong. So this is a really close fight. I can see it being a split decision type of fight where both guys are landing clean the entire fight, and it comes down to scoring the rounds subjectively. Or I could see one guy catching the chin of the other early in that fight with their stances when they're standing in front of each other. They could just tuck their chins and decide to trade in the pocket if they so chooses. But if this fight does go the distance, I think that I lean Zahabi's way. I think he has the more effective boxing, and I think he has the better ground game to fall back on in case he wants to mix this fight up with the ground game. So even though Zahabi's coming off that 1.5-year layoff, I think he will win this fight. In the betting window, I'd say there is value on Morales at that plus 165. Right now, I'd say the line is about accurate where it sits at right now, but the pick is going to be Zahabi, but this one should be a good fight. The next fight is taking place in the women's bantamweight division. We have Sarah Moras, who is 5-4, taking on Macy Chiasson, who is 4-0. The opening betting line for this one was Chiasson, the -300 favorite, to Sarah Moras, the +220 underdog. Right now, over on 5 Dimes, we are seeing Macy Chiasson -800, the biggest favorite on the card by far, to Sarah Moras at +550. Now, massive amount of action coming in on Chiasson in this one. No surprise there. She's looked great in her fight so far. She ran through everybody on the Ultimate Fighter. She made her UFC debut. I guess she won the Ultimate Fighter for her debut, but she made her pay-per-view debut, let's say, or regular card debut versus Gina Manze only a few months ago on March 2nd, and she just ran through Gina Manze in that fight. Chiasson does have excellent ground game, good top pressure, good submissions, good takedowns and ground and pound, really strong in the clinch, but her striking is also really good too. She throws with power, she wings punches. It's a little reckless, but it's not like she's fighting some wicked counter punchers at women's 135 that are gonna take advantage of her reckless striking. Most of the women are just gonna shell up when they see those big powerful shots coming to them like Manze did, and I think that's how this fight ends. Moras has looked pretty average so far in the UFC. She did pull off that armbar victory against Ashley Evans Smith for one of her only wins. She had a tough fight against Jessica Andrade. She lost a fight to Lucia Pudilova and lost to Talita Bernardo, all by unanimous decision. So she's really struggled with pressure fighters, with takedowns. I don't think she has much offense on the feet. She's definitely the biggest threat off of her back. She's got good flexibility. She can throw up submissions off her back very well. She actually was throwing up submissions versus Pudilova, even though she was getting beaten up bad in that fight. Pudilova was hitting her with punches, lighting her up on the feet, dropping her, hitting her with ground and pound on the floor. But Moras was still tough, looking for submissions. And she can hit her own offensive takedown if she so chooses. She did end round 3 of that fight versus Pudilova on top, getting her own takedown. So she, like I said, that just is a testament to her toughness, her cardio. She's not going to give up, even if she's getting beat up for most of the fight. She'll still be fighting to the last bell. But Bernardo was able to take her down. She got that body lock takedown on her. And was able to win the fight in top position. Moras was not able to get any submissions going in that fight. So Chiasson can really win this fight on the ground or on the feet. If I were her, I would take less of a risk and just keep this fight on the feet, where I think that Chiasson has an even bigger advantage. I think Chiasson, if she so chooses, can hit takedowns, end up keep top position, and possibly ground and pound or submit Moras or win a decision on top. But I think that she can just knock her out on the feet, and that would be the least path of resistance for Chiasson. So I'm going to pick the minus 800 favorites or roll in this fight. So we are moving on to the main card of the evening. The first fight is in the middleweight division. We got Andrew Sanchez, who is 10-4, taking on Marc-Andre Beyut, who is 11-1. The opening betting line for this one was Beyut, the minus 155 favorite, to Sanchez plus 115. Right now, over on 5 Dimes, the line has flipped. We're now seeing Sanchez minus 165 to Beyut plus 145. So I'm going to agree with the odds maker in this one. I think that Beyut should be the favorite in this fight. I wouldn't say that he should be the favorite, because I understand why the action is coming in on the UFC veteran in Sanchez. I just think that Beyut is going to win this fight. So I think he has the better, well-rounded MMA game. I think he has the better cardio. He has been scheduled to fight 25 minutes in his last 4 fights. He did go the full 25 minutes 2 times with his opponents Stout and Gavrilovic. And he also finished his opponents Kornberger and Hunter. And his opponent, Adam Hunter, it was the light heavyweight champion at his promotion TKO up in Canada. So Beyut moved up in weight. He withstood the early onslaught of offense from Hunter in that one. He was able to take him down, was able to get mount, and was able to ground and pound finish him to win his second belt over in the TKO promotion in Canada. That's a big promotion up there. They got really solid competition, and Beyut's been really building a name up for himself up there. He's 5-0 in the promotion. He fought at TKO 38, 39, 40, 41, 43, and 44. So he's building a huge fan base up there. I expect the crowd to be behind Beyut in this one a lot. I think that he has really good takedown defense as well. In his fight against Gavrilovic, Gavrilovic was just relentless with the takedown in that fight, and Beyut showed really good defense. He showed good takedown defense. There was a couple moments where Beyut had him up in the air and was going for a slam, but Beyut was able to get his legs out from underneath him and stay up on his feet. And I think that he has shown some pretty solid striking as well. He knocked out his opponent Kornberger. I'd honestly say that Sanchez probably has the more effective striking, even though Sanchez is mostly a wrestler, has a college wrestling background. I think that he's actually adapted his striking pretty well to MMA. His bread and butter is definitely, clinching against the cage, trying to get the takedown. But he does have some good power. He does have good pressure, solid defense, and he's good at capitalizing on mistakes for his opponents. You overextend yourself on a punch, he will get that body lock on you, or if you throw a sloppy kick, he will get in on you, or you throw a spinning technique, he will close that distance before you get the chance to turn around. So he's very good in that aspect. He's very opportunistic. In his fight against Ryan James, he was throwing bombs in that fight. He had James, Ryan James ate so many fucking punches in that fight. It's a miracle that he won that fight. But, Sanchez gassed himself out. He gassed hard in that fight and was eventually finished in round 3 of that fight. Sanchez did bounce back in his most recent fight against Marcos Perez, where he went the full 15 minutes. He showed good cardio. He had, some solid output in round 3, won round 3 of that fight. So it looked like his, cardio and his pace issues have had a slight improvement. But with that being said, I still think that Bayut has the better cardio. He's been training for those 25 minutes with, bigger guys. He's gone the full 25 minutes with, really physically imposing fights where they're grinding, clinchy type of fights, defending takedowns. So I think Bayut's really had all the experience he needs for this matchup with Sanchez. I think that Bayut will be able to stuff the takedowns attempts of Sanchez. I don't think he'll really look for his own takedown defense, even though he can, hit his own offensive takedowns. But I think that Bayut will defend the takedowns of Sanchez. I think that it'll be close on the feet in this one, but I think that Bayut will just be landing the better shots. And, if Sanchez isn't able to get the wrestling going, which I don't think he is, I wouldn't be comfortable laying that minus 165 chalk on him. I'd actually be way more comfortable betting on Bayut as the dog in this one. So I haven't bet on Bayut yet. I'm a little bit worried that his striking won't be enough to overcome Sanchez. I think that Sanchez could possibly outstrike Bayut in this matchup. And of course, Sanchez could take Bayut down. Sanchez has very good takedowns, relentless wrestling, and relentless, clinching against the cage and pressure. So he could wear on Bayut in this one. So it's a close type of fight. I definitely cap it more close to where the odds maker opened it. More like an evens type of fight, 50-50. So at plus 145, I'd say the value is on Bayut. So I'm going to pick him to win this matchup. The next fight takes place in the heavyweight division. We have Walt Harris, who is 12-7, taking on Sergey Spivak, who is 9-0. The opening betting line for this one was Walt Harris, the minus 155 favorite, to Spivak at plus 115. Right now, we are seeing Harris minus 165 to Spivak at plus 145. So more action coming in on Walt Harris's way. I don't disagree with the public in this one. Walt Harris is that UFC tested guy. He's had, 10 fights in the UFC. He's fought stiff competition. He's actually, pretty consistently picked up wins over that lower to mid-level competition of UFC heavyweights. I'd say his best win definitely came in his last fight against Andre Arlovski. Winning that fight via decision, he showed, patience, and he showed, some good accuracy. Was a little bit low activity in that one, but all of Arlovski's fights are like that nowadays. So the fact that Harris was able to pull off that decision win is definitely a feather in his cap. But in this, his opponent in this one, Spivak, making his UFC debut in this one. Spivak's a small heavyweight. He weighed in, I think, at 100 kilos, which is, I believe, 222 pounds around there, which is, not very heavy for a heavyweight at all. Harris is a thick heavyweight. He probably cuts to 265, honestly. And, Spivak is just not looked too, nothing blowing out of the water, He's got a good array of offense. He uses all 8 limbs, his punches, knees, elbows, and kicks. He, can hit his own takedowns. He looks like he's got a good submission base. But, his level of competition is bad. It's low-level guys. It's older journeymen who have had 100 fights in MMA. He fought one guy who had this 300 fights in MMA or something like that. Travis Fulton, 255 wins, 52 losses, and 10 draws. So, he's, and Tony Lopez, 44-year-old, 61-28 fighter. That was his last win, So he's looked decent beating these guys up, but, there's a lot of light heavyweights, a lot of heavyweights that could go in there and look just as decent in that one. So Spivak has really not shown me anything that leads to believe that he's a UFC worthy in this one. I think that Harris will be able to win this fight wherever it goes. I think that Harris has looked better on the ground. He, against Mark Godbeer, he had a single leg. He had a tight side control. He got mount. He was able, eventually, Godbeer got back to guard, but Harris was hitting him with some big ground and pound against the cage. I think that Harris's size difference in this fight will actually lead him to maybe execute a wrestling game plan. When he's going to have 30, 40 pounds on Spivak in this fight, that temptation to hit the takedown and get on top and just land blows from inside closed guard is going to be hard to resist for Walt Harris. Even though he has, I'd say stand-up is where he's more comfortable. He's got good kicks. He's got some power in his left hand. He floored Spitz in that last fight with his left hand and eventually finished him with some ground and pound in the second round of that fight. I think Harris is just an improving heavyweight. He's been kind of a lower level guy in the UFC for the past couple of years, but he's made some pretty big strides in his past couple of fights. So I think he will have all the tools necessary to beat Spivak in this fight. And I think that honestly at minus 165, there's a good amount of value on Walt Harris in this fight. So I'm picking Walt Harris to get this one done, probably by finish via ground and pound TKO in the second round. Next fight is in the bantamweight division. We have Brad Katona, who is 8-0, taking on Marabdivashvili, who is 8-4. The opening betting line for this one was Marabdivashvili, the plus 170 underdog, to Katona at minus 230. I knew he opened as an underdog, but I kind of forgot about it because since then the line has flipped. Dvalishvili is minus 170 to Katona plus 150. The motherfucker who opened Brad Katona at minus 230, man, I hope that's a line error. I really do hope that's a line error. I honestly don't really see how you could possibly open Brad Katona as a minus 230 favorite. I got to hit up people on Twitter and the Sharedog forums to see if anybody's got a bet slip for Marabdivashvili at plus 170. So if you do, congratulations to you, because I think this is a really favorable fight for Marabdivashvili, man. I love this dude. He's a peppy little spit fuck, I'll tell you that. He goes in there, bell to bell, man. This dude is putting pressure on you. He's looking for the takedown. He's got incredible wrestling, man. His takedowns are high level, man. Against Frankie Saenz and against Ricky Simone, two high level wrestlers and grapplers in their own right, he was able to out-grapple those guys for the majority of their fight. Dvalishvili is not really a top control type of guy. He really likes the takedowns and just, grinding on you, getting that body lock and just not letting go. He doesn't give a fuck if you get back to your feet because he'll drag you back down. He doesn't care if you'll Grammy roll out of the takedown because he'll get a hold of you. It's hard to shake the grip of Marab. And even though Katona is a pretty solid grappler, I just don't see him having what it takes to stop the grappling of Dvalishvili in this fight. And Dvalishvili's only two losses in the UFC have been, pretty mean losses if you want to think about it. He was winning the first two rounds versus Ricky Simone, and then we all know what happened in that fight. He went for a takedown. He spiked his head against the canvas. He knocked himself out with 50 seconds left in the fight. Simone swept him over and got the guillotine, and then Dvalishvili woke up while the guillotine was locked in. So he started pedaling his legs for, close to 45 seconds, just trying to keep the blood circulating through his body so he wouldn't pass out. Wasn't fighting the hands at all. Very untraditional defense. And then once the fight was over, he rolled over and, he moved the second the fight was over, he moved. He rolled over to his knees. He sat up. He took a couple deep breaths. And once the doctors got to him, he collapsed. And once he collapsed, the referee, an inexperienced referee from New Jersey, he thought that he was no longer able. I don't even know what he thought. He thought he was out, But, the fight was over. Marabdivashvili rolled out off his back and got to his knees. He was not out at the 15-minute mark of that fight. He was not unconscious. He moved. He got up to his feet, and he was pretty woozy. A lot of fighters are woozy. A lot of fighters collapse due to exhaustion after their fight, but they were still conscious when that 15-minute mark hit that fight. So that inexperienced ref gave the technical submission to Ricky Simone in that fight. a pretty infamous moment in MMA in the past couple years. Definitely one of the weirder moments. So that was his one loss, and the other loss to Frankie Saenz was a split decision loss where he landed 11 takedowns in that fight. And just goes to show he does not give a fuck about top control. He's just trying to rip you down. He doesn't care if you get back to your field. He'll rip you back down, and that's what Frankie Saenz did in that fight. But even though Katona, and one more thing about Dvalishvili is that he has pretty solid boxing. He throws a lot of spinning attacks, a lot of bullshit attempts that I really wish he wouldn't do. But behind all that, he's got good fundamentals. He's got good boxing. He's got power in his right hand. He's got a really nice head kick. And I think that if he stuck to the fundamentals more instead of throwing those spinning attacks so much, I think he'd be a lot more effective in his striking. Now, I do think Katona will be very competitive in the striking if this fight stays on the feet. I think he's got very solid boxing. I think he had a competitive fight with Matthew Lopez. Matthew Lopez not the best of strikers. I think Lopez was actually getting the better of Katona in that fight. He was taken down a few times by Matthew Lopez in that fight, and I think that's the deciding factor in this fight. If Matthew Lopez was able to take Katona down 2 or 3 times, then I think Dvalishvili will be able to take him down 8 or 9 times. So he's very active from the bottom. He throws elbows from the bottom. He's aggressive in getting back to his feet. But I just don't think that he will have the takedown defense. I don't think he will have the discipline to fight a stand-up fight and avoid the takedown. And it's funny that he had a very, very similar end to his last fight as the Dvalishvili controversy, where at the very buzzer of that fight, he had a rear naked choke locked in on Lopez, and once the fight was over, he let go of the choke, and Lopez was out of it. He was half conscious, he was kind of woozy, his eyes were all googly, and his corner was trying to tell him to get up. And then in that fight, the referee made the right decision. Lopez was moving enough and conscious enough after the bell to not be ruled a submission in that one, and that ended up being a decision. So even though Katona was out-grappled for the majority of that fight, I think he was on his way to winning a 29-28 decision regardless. I think that he was able to capitalize on a mistake of of Lopez in that fight and almost choke him out, similar to how Dvalishvili almost got choked out. So Katona's not completely out of this fight. He could show up and looked very improved. He won the Ultimate Fighter. He's a very impressive undefeated fighter. He's making very impressive leaps in every single one of his fights. He's really active. He had 4 fights in 2018, and he's just getting started as a pro. So Brad Katona could come out here and surprise us all and put on a great performance against Dvalishvili, but I just don't think he will be able to stop the takedowns of Dvalishvili. I think that Merab Dvalishvili wins this fight via decision, 2 rounds to 1. I think Katona will have a little bit of success maybe in rounds 2, but Dvalishvili's cardio and pressure will just take over late. Next fight is in the featherweight division. We have Cub Swanson, who is 25-10, taking on Shane Burgos, who is 11-1. The opening betting line for this one was Cub Swanson, the -175 favorite, to Shane Burgos, the +135 underdog. Right now, we are seeing the line flip over on 5 dimes. We have Shane Burgos -160 to Cub Swanson at +140. So very shocking that Shane Burgos opened as an underdog in this one. I actually bet his line pretty early in this one at plus money. I was shocked that he was plus money versus Cub Swanson. Cub Swanson has lost his past 3 fights in a row. He has looked, like a shell of his former self. He's not totally done yet, but 5 of his 6 losses, most recent losses, have come by the way of submission, and he's fighting a very dangerous submission artist in Shane Burgos here. Burgos is, I think, just the better, well-rounded martial artist at this point in his career. He's got very solid stand-up. He's got a nice jab, a good front push kick. He was hitting some nice leg kicks on Kurt Hollebach in his last fight, but his defense is not the best. He keeps his hands very low. He relies on head movement, but sometimes he gets a little lackadaisical with it, where he's trying to use all head movement, but he doesn't give his opponents the respect they deserve, and he gets caught with some punches, and that's exactly what happened with Kurt Hollebach. Kurt Hollebach hit him with a 3 or 4 punch combo in the first 90 seconds of their fight that dropped Shane Burgos. It didn't look like it wasn't a one punch knockdown. So I'm not going to say Burgos is chinny or he has a bad chin. I just think his defense could be a little bit better. So even though he got dropped by that 3 or 4 punch combo, within 5 seconds, Shane Burgos threw up an armbar, and 10 seconds later he tapped Kurt Holobaugh out with that armbar. So just a wicked armbar off of his back from Shane Burgos after he was, looked like he was hurt pretty bad with the combination from Holobaugh in that one. And Holobaugh hits a lot harder than Cub Swanson does. Cub Swanson still, throws bombs. His boxing is very solid. He's got good fundamentals. Swanson's got a good calf kick. Like I said, he just doesn't look like himself anymore. He doesn't look very powerful. He doesn't look very quick. He started that Moicano fight very slow and was dropped by that jab. He was hurt for a while in that fight and eventually got rear naked choked in that fight. He did look pretty solid against Frankie Edgar. He defended most of Frankie Edgar's takedowns, but he just wasn't active enough with his offense. He was solid defensively. He wasn't getting hit with much, and he was defending the takedowns, but he just didn't throw enough offense back to win that decision. And Frankie easily outpointed him to a decision in that one. So if this fight stays on the feet, I think Shane Burgos will be throwing the harder punches. I think he has a chance at testing that chin of Cub Swanson and possibly knocking him out, possibly, knocking him down and going for a submission on the floor. If, Shane Burgos chooses to keep this fight standing the entire fight, I think that Cub Swanson could be competitive. Shane Burgos had his share of struggles versus Calvin Kattar in their fight. He struggled with Calvin Kattar's jab, his pressure. He did make some adjustments in that fight. He started, slipping the jab of Kattar. He started punching Kattar's body a little more. He did win the second round of that fight after losing the first, but in the third round, he was just caught with a couple of stiff punches from Kattar, and he was knocked out for the first loss of his career in that one. So if this fight is contested strictly on the feet, Cub Swanson has a chance to win this. He still has very good boxing. He still throws punches with some real power behind him, and he could possibly win this fight via a close striking battle. But I just side with the more younger, the more aggressive fighter, the guy who throws with a little more power, a little quicker fighter at this stage in his career. He's got the better ground game for sure. I'm just going to pick Shane Burgos to win this fight in this one. Where the line is at now, it is a little bit tough to trust Burgos because he has I'd say he's kind of underperformed in the UFC so far. That loss to Kattar, he got dropped by Holobaugh. He was struggling versus Charles Rosa, so he's definitely not lived up to all the expectations. But I still think that this is a very winnable fight for him, and I think that Burgos will win this fight via submission in the second or third round. The co-main event of the evening is taking place in the middleweight division. We have Derek Brunson, who is 18-7, taking on Elias Theodorou, who is 16-2. The opening betting line for this one was a pick'em at -120 for both fighters, and right now over on 5Dimes we are seeing a pick'em at -110 for both fighters. It's a pick'em across every single sports book in this one, so just a dead even fight across everyone's minds, and I can see why. It's these guys are pretty much polar opposites of one another. While Theodorou doesn't really look for a finish much, he's looking to have good footwork, move in and out, constantly moving. He's got that unorthodox style. He throws a lot of feints and feeling strikes. He throws a lot of kicks out. He's just a very weird, unorthodox type of fighter, but it works. He's got good cardio. He's got a good chin. He's never been finished. He can hit offensive takedowns of his own. He can take a punch. There's a lot to like about Elias Theodorou. He's got a very fun personality. Being a ring card guy for MMA promotions. He's definitely a UFC staple at this point. But so is Derek Brunson. Derek Brunson struggled a little bit lately. That setback to Jacare got knocked out in that fight, got knocked out by Israel Adesanya in his last fight. So rough 2018 for Derek Brunson. He's a very fast starter, man. Unlike Theodoro, he wants to go balls to the wall. He wants to knock you out in the first round, and it shows, man. His footwork is bad. He gets wild. He leaves his chin out there on a silver platter. He's got a great wrestling pedigree, Derek Brunson does, but he doesn't use it. He very rarely hits a takedown. He doesn't, when he tries to shoot for a takedown, he doesn't set it up right. It's very, it's coming from far away. Israel Adesanya saw those shots coming from a mile away. He easily defended those takedowns. He was drilling him with knees to the gut, and he eventually finished him with head kicks in that fight. So, Brunson just never really adapted his wrestling game effectively for MMA, and he kind of fell in love with his hands a little bit after scoring a couple early knockouts. He's just, kind of abandoned most of his technique in his fights lately and just gone balls to the wall, which has, not really been too good for him. But that's facing a very powerful striker, powerful counter strikers like Jacare and Israel Adesanya. He's not fighting a counter or a power striker at all in this one. Theodoro, hasn't knocked out anything. Can't finish a sandwich. But that doesn't mean that Theodoro can't win this fight. Theodoro can easily withstand that early swarm of Brunson and then outpoint him in rounds 2 and 3 for a decision. But I favor Brunson to get the knockout early in this one. I think that Theodoro is just a little too lazy defensively. He engages in the clinches recklessly. He doesn't react to punches very well. He throws out a lot of those feeler kicks, those feints and those kicks where he's not really intending on hitting you. Those are lazy strikes sometimes, and if your opponent times them right and throws a nice counter, man, he could definitely floor Theodoro. And Eric Anders had Theodoro really badly hurt in round 2, but couldn't finish him. He dropped him with a couple right hands. He had him on wobbly legs with those left hands. And I think that, Eric Anders is nowhere near the striker that Derek Brunson is. He's actually a pretty poor striker. So the fact that Anders was able to test that chin of Theodoro makes me think that Brunson will be able to do the same thing. And even though Theodoro has never been finished, even though he's fought in the likes of guys like Thiago Santos, I think that Brunson will be the first one to finish him here. I think that Brunson gets back in the win column. He blitzes him early, and he catches Theodoro with that bad head movement where he kind of flinches up and he kind of desperately grabs that clinch. I think that Brunson will hit him with a short counter punch and knock down Theodoro and eventually get him out of there in the first round. But if this fight goes past the third round, I definitely favor Theodoro to get it done by decision. So I'm going to pick, probably bet this one Brunson round 1 and then look to live bet Theodoro after round 1 or, maybe bet Theodoro by decision pre-fight. So I'm going to pick Brunson to win by knockout in first round. And in the main event of the evening in the lightweight division, we have Iaquinta, who is 14-4-1, taking on Donald Cerrone, who is 35-11. The opening betting line for this one was Iaquinta, the slight favorite at -135, to Donald Cerrone as a slight underdog at -105. Right now, over on our affiliated sportsbook, 5dimes.eu, we see Iaquinta, the slight favorite at -115, so to Donald Cerrone at -105. So almost to pick him in this one, and I really see why, man. This is a really close type of fight. And, I think that both guys have path to victory in this one. Now, I'm a huge fan of both of these guys. Both of them have, great personalities, incredible fighting skills. And, both of them are coming off of very impressive victories. Iaquinta is bouncing back from that short notice title fight loss to Khabib. And he came back and he defeated Kevin Lee in his last fight. Now, not a flawless performance from Iaquinta in that one, but I think that he was in control of that fight from the jump. He was, going for those takedowns early, faking that single leg, and then he throwing a spinning back fist, and he hurt Lee early in that fight. He started off the first round fast, landing some heavy shots, and made Lee uncomfortable from the jump. Now he did get taken down with a body lock, and get his back taken in rounds 2 and 3 of that fight. But he defended just like he did back in 2012 or whenever they first fought. Iaquinta's rear naked choke defense is great. His defensive grappling is great. It showed against Khabib Nurmagomedov. Khabib was not able to do the normal amount of ground and pound damage that he is to most of his opponents versus Al, because Al has a great wrestling base. And his striking is really good too, man. His accuracy with his punches is great. He was just cleanly outstriking Kevin Lee in that fight. Rounds 1, 4, and 5, I think, were pretty clear rounds for Al Iaquinta in that one. I think Al Iaquinta almost won the second round. Even though Kevin Lee did have he get the takedown, get the body triangle and was looking for that rear naked choke, Al Iaquinta escaped that body triangle and was getting up and was landing the harder punches in the second half of that round. So that was a round I honestly think he could have given to Al Iaquinta, because Lee did not really have much success with that body lock, and actually probably did more negative for himself than positive. And Al Iaquinta, not just a boxer though, too. He's got a good body kick. He can even throw a nice head kick. He hit Kevin Lee with some solid head kicks in that fight. But he is, with that boxing stance, he can be leg kicked. He can plot forward a little bit. He can be a little bit predictable, and that's not going to be a good thing against Donald Cowboy Cerrone, because Cowboy Cerrone is going to be the much more diverse striker in this matchup, and I think he just has more tools on the feet. Cerrone's got great boxing of his own. He's got incredible kicks. I think will be the much better kicker in this fight. He's got a wicked fast body kick. He sneaks those head kicks up there, I think, better than anybody in the UFC. I think Cerrone's probably got the best head kicks, maybe in UFC history. He can when you're kicking him, he can catch your kick and then he can hit a takedown on you. He did that versus Robbie Lawler. He did that versus I believe Leon Edwards, and he definitely did that versus Alexander Hernandez in his last fight. He defeated Mike Perry at 170 earlier in the year. I think it was in November, around 6 or 7 months ago, and then he decided to drop back down to lightweight. A lot of people were questioning. They're like, "Oh shit, Cerrone was looking better at 170. Should he really go back down to 155?" He was killing himself to get to 155, and his chin has looked a lot better at 170. He's been able to take a better body shot at 170, and he's fighting a young beast, a pressure fighter, which is typically his weakness. A guy with solid boxing. Alex Hernandez came into that fight a 2-1 favorite, and Donald Cerrone put a beating on Alex Hernandez in that fight. Man, he was countering Alex Hernandez's pressure with those knees to the body. He got hit with a couple punches early, but Cerrone's chin looked good. He looked like he was reacting to shots a lot better than he was a couple years ago at 155. And then he got in that flow state, man. And once Cerrone's in that flow state, man, he's hard to beat, man. His striking gets so creative, so diverse. He starts, hitting you with those knees, the head kicks. His punches were on point. He was just, he couldn't miss in round 2 versus Alex Hernandez, and he eventually got the head kick that dropped Hernandez and then finished him off with some ground and pound. What an incredible performance from Donald Cerrone, dropping back down to lightweight as the underdog versus the young guy who was coming up in the division, who was 2-0 in the UFC, just ran through Dariush, just beat OAM convincingly, was coming in there with a lot of hype behind him, and Donald Cerrone just shut that shit down. So, you can never count Cerrone out. He's still, I honestly consider him one of the best fighters in UFC history, and he's not the greatest fighter in UFC history. I'm not saying that at all. In terms of success in his career, overall skill, I don't think he's really in like the top 5. But when you're talking about the best fighters that embody the UFC, that embody MMA, that are just some of the most skilled, toughest sons of bitches that ever step foot in the cage, Donald Cerrone has got to be on your list, man. And no disrespect to Al Iaquinta too. Al Iaquinta is a warrior. He's a hell of a fighter, but Al Iaquinta has struggled with activity lately. He's struggled with the UFC. He's been very vocal with his, disagreements with the UFC. And, even though he's been in the UFC since 2012, he's not had nearly the amount of experience that Donald Cerrone has. He lost in the Ultimate Fighter to Michael Chiesa, and he's had a very, very impressive victory record since then with 9 wins, 2 losses. But Donald Cerrone is 22-8 in the UFC. This will be his 31st fight in the UFC alone. He's got over 40 fights in Zuffa. I think he's got the most wins in UFC history. He's one of the most active fighters on the roster. He's got incredible striking, incredible jiu-jitsu, good wrestling, a likable personality. If Donald Cerrone isn't one of your favorite fighters, man, you're just not a fan of MMA, in my opinion. But with that being said, man, this matchup is close, man. It's real close. I think that Iaquinta will be the better boxer in this one, but in terms of overall striking, I got to give the edge to Cerrone. I think that Al's best chance is to start fast, man. Cerrone does not like when you start fast. I'd say most of his UFC losses are by first round knockout, right? I think Till knocked him out in the first round. Masvidal dropped him in the first round and then knocked him out in the second round. I think Dos Anjos knocked him out in the first round. Let's see, anybody else has first round finishes. No, that's all for Anthony Pettis finished him in the first round. So without a doubt, Cerrone is vulnerable in the first round. So if Iaquinta comes out, starts fast, blitzes him, and tries to test that chin of Cerrone, make him uncomfortable, I think that's where Iaquinta has the best chance of winning this fight. But as the fight goes on, as Cerrone gets to settle in, he gets his timing down, he gets more comfortable, he gets in that flow state where he's timing those, incredible combinations and using his diverse striking attack, man, I favor Donald Cerrone. Cerrone, even though Iaquinta's cardio looked great, man, his cardio, his pressure, his activity, up until the final bell of that fight, man, he was kicking Kevin Lee's ass in round 5 of that fight, landing heavy punches, walking him down. Iaquinta looked great in round 5, but Cerrone also has great 5-round cardio. He went 5 hard rounds with Leon Edwards. He actually won rounds 4 and 5 of that fight with Leon Edwards after losing the early rounds in that one. So that just goes to show that he gets more comfortable and gets better as the fight goes on. So the betting strategy for this one, I think, would be to bet Iaquinta in round 1, and then if Cerrone is still standing after round 1 or still standing after that early onslaught of punches from Iaquinta, then look to live bet Cerrone in the middle of round 1 or after round 1, and hope he takes over the fight late. He could score a late TKO if the strikes accumulate like he did versus Hernandez, or he could win a decision, 4 rounds to 1, 3 rounds to 2. But I'm really expecting a close type of fight in this one. It's going to be a great matchup, and that's why the odds are so close. In terms of money lines, I think it would be a pass on either side. Maybe if you got Cerrone at plus money, plus 120, 130 earlier in the week, I'd say that would be a good bet. But betting either of these guys as a favorite is risky. I think both of these guys, like I said, have path to victory. Both of them can lose this fight easily, and it's just going to be a really great fight. But I slightly side with Donald Cerrone in this one. I think that they both have great wrestling. I think Cerrone's got the better jiu-jitsu of the two. I think Cerrone's got the more diverse attack on the feet. He's got more 5-round experience. He's got more, just more activity lately, and I think that Donald Cerrone will win this fight. But it's going to be a close one. I expect a 48-47 decision for Donald Cerrone in this fight. So that is going to do it for the UFC Ottawa card. We got 12 fights going down this Saturday night in Ottawa, Ontario, Canada. From the Canadian Tire Center. 5 p.m. is when the prelims kick off, and the main card starts at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. Nice and early card for this one. So with that being said, we are just going to quickly recap the UFC Sunrise that went down this past weekend, and then that will be all for the podcast in this one. So I'm just pulling up this card real quick. So we had, starting things off, Diego Lima, looking real crisp with his outstriking Court McGee to a decision in this one. Court McGee came on strong in this one. He ended up dropping Lima in the 3rd round, but McGee looked slow in that one. His takedowns did not look good, and Lima looked much improved. Angela Hill, won a unanimous decision over Jody Escobil. Just a dominant striking performance like Hill, like we all expected in that one. Jim Miller getting the rear naked choke over Jason Gonzalez in this one. Just, great performance from Miller, getting that takedown, getting that choke in front of his family and his kids. Getting that $180,000 payday, plus the $50,000 bonus. So that's $230 or $230,000 for that rear naked choke for Jim Miller. Gilbert Burns got the rear naked choke over Mike Davis in that one. Carla Esparza and Virna Jandiroba had a real competitive grappling type of fight, but Carla Esparza, man, is continuing to improve, continuing to get better, even in the late stages of her career, beating these impressive grapplers. Gedalia, even though she lost that fight, she looked really good in that one. Calvillo, she won that fight, and now Jandiroba, Esparza picking up the victory in that one. Augusto Sakai won a decision robbery over Andrei Arlovski. I had Andrei Arlovski winning this fight like 3 rounds to nothing, maybe 2 rounds to 1 for Arlovski, but just inexcusable for the judges to give that fight to Sakai. A clear robbery in that one. Takeshi Sato withstood the early storm from Saunders. Saunders won round 1, but was eventually finished in round 2 of this fight. Roosevelt Roberts won a very comfortable and cautious decision over Thomas Gifford. Corey Sandhagen and John Lineker, what an epic fight this was. Really close type of fight. It just comes down to what type of fighter do you think is more effective? The guy who's landing the more, damaging single shots, or the guy who's landing the more consistent shots in this fight? And that, Corey Sandhagen was landing the more consistent output. Not too many power shots in this one, while Lineker was landing the more seldom power shots in this one, digging to the body, digging those powerful left hooks that he loves. Real close fight, but I had Sandhagen winning this one, with the first 2 rounds going to Sandhagen. Glover Teixeira getting the second round rear naked choke over Kutaleba. Kutaleba, was swarming him in round 1 like we all expected. He looked like he had Teixeira hurt pretty bad, but good old Glover withstood the early storm, got on top, and got the choke in round 2. Pretty similar to the Carl Robeson fight, actually. Mike Perry looking like a brand new fighter out there, fighting to disciplined, unanimous decisions. A very impressive victory from him in that one. Don't remember too much about this fight. I got to rewatch it. But next fight, Greg Hardy ran through Smolyakov in round 1 like we all expected. Terrible performance from Smolyakov. And in the main event of the evening, like I predicted last week, man, I couldn't put my finger on it. I couldn't say why Jack Hermansson was going to win this fight. I said all things on paper tell you that Jacare should win this fight. He's the better grappler. His boxing has looked better. He's had the 5-round experience. He's fought the better competition. But something was telling me the momentum of Hermansson was going to bring him to victory in this one. I was picking Hermansson by submission. Hermansson did get close in his patent arm guillotine to Jacare, but Jacare defended, very perfectly like he does to all submissions. But Hermansson, just on the feet in this one was so impressive, man. His boxing looks so good. His pace, his pressure, his cardio in this one looked great. He came out to an early lead. He hurt Jacare in the first round, almost choked him out in the first round. Won rounds 2 of this fight. He dropped round 3 in this one. He was looking pretty tired, but he dug deep, man, and he runs I think rounds 4 of this fight for sure. And I think Jacare might have came back and won round 5 in my opinion. Let me see if I scored it that way on the Verdict app. I had Jacare winning rounds 3 and 5 in this one. So competitive fight from Jacare, but he just didn't look there. He got stunned with that early combination early versus Hermansson, and he just wasn't really the same. He didn't have that same tenacity, that same power behind his punches, wasn't really looking for the takedown too much, and, Hermansson just put on an incredible performance. So, won a little bit on Hermansson live betting in this one. Great opportunities for live betting in this entire card. Mike Perry was an underdog after round 1. Glover Teixeira was an underdog after round 1. Hermansson was an underdog a lot of times throughout this fight as a live dog. So, very good opportunities for live betting in this one. I recommend BetDSI or 5dimes.eu for all your live betting needs. And now, that will do it for the program. We recapped just now the UFC Sunrise card that went down last weekend, and we analyzed and predicted all 12 UFC fights going down this Saturday night in Ottawa, Ontario, Canada. So this has been the 59th episode of Martian MMA. Hope you all enjoyed it, and I will see you before UFC 237 next week. Peace.